So I would stand there at the end of the board shaking. I would waste a lot of time in practice. Sometimes it would be 5 minutes, 10 minutes. One practice, I stood on the board for 45 minutes and I wouldn't go. I was wasting my time. I was wasting my teammates' time. I was wasting my coach's time. And Eric finally said to me, he said, "Adam, are you going to do this dive?" And I'm like, "Ever?" Like, "Yes, of course. One day I will do this dive." And he said, "Great. Then what are you waiting for?" And I've heard that voice in my head every time I've been afraid to take a risk and I've been hesitating to go outside my comfort zone. I heard it when I was afraid to write my first book and I didn't think I was ready. I heard it when I was considering giving a TED Talk and I didn't feel capable of doing a good job at it. I think the lesson I took from that was I thought that I had to build my confidence in order to take the leap. And that was completely backward. You build your confidence by taking the leap. And so I was kind of waiting for the magic day when I felt ready. And the reality is you become ready by putting yourself in situations that you don't think you can excel at yet.
Do you think that's enough to push people off the board? As a sort of an analogy for life generally, because there'll be so many people that have just heard that and just hearing that will enable some of them to take the leap. And then there's this other stubborn crowd that will hear that will understand it, that will believe it's true, and they still won't take the leap. They still will stay in that job. They still won't push themselves beyond their zone of comfort. Is there anything else that's required to get those people over the edge? Or is it too individualistic to know?
Well, I think one thing that group of people might have in common is a pervasive imposter syndrome, right? The sense that, well, first of all, when people talk about imposter syndrome, sometimes they say, okay, like I'm a fraud and it's only a matter of minutes until everybody finds out. And that feeling is actually pretty rare. What's much more common, if you look at the research of Basima Tufik, is imposter thoughts, everyday doubts about, am I as good as other people think I am? Am I ready for this role that other people are encouraging me to take on? Can I afford to quit my job and try becoming an entrepreneur? And what the research suggests is that there are actually some surprising benefits of having those imposter thoughts. Basima finds, she studies medical professionals, investment professionals, military cadets, students, that when you have more frequent imposter thoughts, they actually can become fuel to motivate you to persist toward your goals. And the reason that happens is there's a gap between what other people think you're capable of and what you feel prepared for. And you realize, okay, I've got to put in extra effort and I've got to be better at listening to other people and learning from them in order to close the gap. So Basima's advice is when you feel like an imposter, you should recognize that other people think you're pretty amazing. And now, all right, let's live up to those expectations. And I would go even further. I would say it's really tempting to trust your own judgment of your abilities above other people because you know more about yourself than any other human can possibly know about you. But here's the problem. You know too much about yourself to compare yourself accurately to others. And you're also not neutral, right? You can't be objective and independent and unbiased. So I think what you want to do is you want to see yourself through the eyes of people who know you well. And if multiple people believe in you, it's probably time to believe them.
Give me one more. Let's make this the closing one. As it relates to realizing our potential and unlocking our hidden potential, which is, if I was able to achieve anything with this podcast over the time that we've ran it, allowing people to realize and pursue their potential, I think would be one of the greatest achievements that we as a team could have achieved by doing this podcast. Yeah. It's something that I think people's, much of their happiness, much of their fulfillment, much of their health probably lies in the pursuit of their potential, whatever that means. And all of the opposite stuff, much of their dissatisfaction, their unhappiness probably lies in their regret and their understanding that they can and could have done more in their lives. I mean, you think about Bronnie Ware all the time, that study she did on those palliative patients where so many of them wish they'd lived the life true to themselves. So many of them wish that they'd taken that jump and pursued that thing that was maybe a little bit more risky. So what is the closing argument here for those people that are trying to unlock their hidden potential?
Well, I think if you look at regret, psychologists find that our biggest regrets in the long run are not our failures. They're our failures to try. And it's the actions not taken that we wish we could redo the most. I think finding the motivation and the courage to take those risks is not always easy for people. And I think one thing that I found helpful over time that has some good evidence behind it is a lot of us know we need other people's input in order to get better. So what we do is we ask for feedback. And the problem with asking for feedback is you end up with a bunch of cheerleaders and critics. The cheerleaders you don't fully trust because they see you through rose-colored glasses and they just applaud your best self. The critics are devastating. They attack your worst self. We want our coaches, people who see your hidden potential and help you become a better version of yourself. And see, I mean, Steve, you've seen this forever. World-class athletes and musicians and actors have coaches. We all need coaches in our lives. And they don't have to be somebody we hire. You don't have to have a budget. They're people that you rely on who are part of that challenge network, who enable you to keep growing. So how do you get your cheerleaders and critics to be better coaches? What you do is instead of asking them for feedback, you seek their advice. When you ask for feedback, people look at the past. If you ask for advice, they turn to the future and they become more specific and more actionable in giving you tips and suggestions. So if you go back, I'll give you the personal example on this one. Go back to the military leaders that I taught who told me that they gained nothing from my session, but they hope I learned something. I've got a bunch of critics in that situation. And they're demoralizing me. I want to give up. I'm like, wonder if I could actually build the ability to hibernate. And then in a few months, I'll feel better. But I had committed to teach a second session for these military leaders. And it was about a week later. I didn't have time to reboot all my content. And so I went to my critics and tried to turn them into coaches. And I asked them for advice on what to do differently in the next session. And one of them said, a big mistake I made was I led with my credentials. And I tried to convince them that I was an expert. Well, I was 25 years old. These are seasoned military leaders. They've got multi-billion-pound budgets. They've got thousands of flying hours under their belts. They've got Top Gun-style nicknames. I'm not going to convince them that I am more experienced than they are. And this one person said, you should try calling out the elephant in the room. Be a little more vulnerable. So I walk in the next week. I look out at the room, and I say, all right, I know what you're all thinking right now. What could I possibly learn from a professor who's 12 years old? Silence. And then one guy, call sign Sandoon, jumps in and he says, that's ridiculous. You got to be at least 13. They all burst out laughing. It broke the ice. I more or less taught the same material, but the feedback was much more positive afterward. They told me that although I was junior in experience, I dealt with the evidence in an interesting way, and they liked learning from somebody who was almost as young as the millennials they were trying to lead. And I learned from that experience that the very people it felt like they were trying to take me down, if I asked for their advice instead of their feedback, they actually gave me a tip that built me up.
It made me think about something that I learned from reading your work, which is this difference between self-promotion and idea promotion as well. I actually sent it to a friend earlier on. My friend runs a personal branding company. It's called Ashley. The company's called Great Influence. And he spends his time basically helping leaders build their personal brand. And he'll often send me things that he's seen online. And when I read about your concept of self-promotion versus idea promotion, I realized that all the things he sends me that are bad are self-promotion, and all the things that he sends me are good are fundamentally idea promotion. What is the distinction, just so we're clear?
I think the distinction for me is that self-promotion is about saying, look at me. Let me tell you about all my accomplishments and awards. I'm going to show off my trophies, and I'm trying to impress you and make you think that I'm great. Idea promotion is saying, I have something worth sharing, and I want to elevate a product, a service, an insight. And people have dramatically different reactions to the two, right? The first comes across as narcissistic and bragging and self-centered. The second is actually seen as an act of generosity. You're taking your knowledge and your skills and you're trying to create a gift for other people and hoping that they receive it. And I think this is so important because a lot of people don't share their ideas. They don't put their work out there because they're afraid of looking like they're self-promoting. And they are doing such a disservice to the world by not releasing their creativity.
So many people have a problem with that. So, you know, so many people have a problem, especially when they're making a transition from being someone who was quiet or silent to that first post, that first book, that first, and part of that is because of the impact it has on the people that know you. So for me, for example, the first time I wrote like a quote or an idea online, I felt that anxiety of, oh my God, my friends from school are going to think I think I'm like Mahatma Gandhi or like Nelson Mandela or something, because I'm sharing my ideas. And the sheer fact that I'm sharing my ideas means that I think I've got good ideas and I think I'm smart. And so the best thing to do is just not to share the ideas so that my friends don't judge me. For whatever reason, I managed to persist.